Hey guys, I'm back to read the rest of chapter 1 of The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And when we left off, William had just finished telling us about how he was scared that the wizard had put some sort of curse on him and that he was going to die because he had eaten bubblegum that some other little boys in the village had stolen from this wizard who had dropped the gumdrops. My fear of wizards and magic only grew worse whenever Grandpa told stories. If you saw my grandpa, you might think he was a kind of wizard himself. He was so old that he couldn't remember the year he'd been born. So cracked and wrinkled that his hands and feet looked as if they were chiseled from stone. And his clothes! Grandpa insisted on wearing the same tattered coat and trousers every day. Whenever he emerged from the forest, puffing on his hand-rolled cigar, you'd think one of the trees had grown legs and started walking. It was Grandpa who told me the greatest story about magic I'd ever heard. Long ago, before the giant maize and tobacco farms came along and cleared away our great forests, when a person could lose track of the sun inside the trees, the land was rich with antelope, zebra, and wildebeests, also lions, hippos, and leopards. Grandpa was a famous hunter, so good with his bow and arrow that it became his duty to protect his village and provide its meat. One day, while Grandpa was out hunting, he came across a man who'd been killed by a poisonous pit viper, which is a snake. He alerted the nearest village, and soon after, they returned with their witch doctor. The Singanga took one look at the dead man, then reached into his bag and tossed some medicines into the trees. Seconds later, the earth began to move as hundreds of vipers slithered out of the shadows and gathered around the corpse, hypnotized by the spell. The wizard then stood on the dead man's chest and drank a cup of potion, which seemed to flow through his feet and into the lifeless body. Then, to Grandpa's amazement, the dead man's fingers began to move and he sat up. Together, he and the wizard inspected the fangs of each snake, looking for the one that had bitten him. "Believe it," Grandpa told me. "I saw this with my own eyes." I certainly believed it, along with every other story about witches and things unexplained. Whenever I went down the dark trails alone, my imagination spun wild. What scared me most were the Gul Wamkulu, the magical dancers that lived in the murky shadows of the forest. They sometimes appeared in the daylight, performing in tribal ceremonies when we Chua boys became men. They were not real people, we were told, but spirits of our dead ancestors sent to roam the earth. Their appearance was ghastly. Each had the face and skin of animals, and some walked on stilts that appeared taller. Once, I saw one scurry backward up a pole like a spider, and when they danced, it was as if 1,000 men were inside their bodies, each moving in the opposite direction. When the Gul Wamkulu weren't performing, they traveled the forest and dambos, looking for young boys to take back to the graveyards. What happened to you there? I never wanted to know. Whenever I saw one, even at a ceremony, I dropped everything and ran. Once, when I was very young, a magic dancer suddenly appeared in our courtyard. His head was wrapped in a flour sack, but underneath was the long nose of an elephant and a gaping hole for a mouth. My mother and father were in the fields, so my sisters and I ran for the bush, where we watched the dancers snatch our favorite chicken. And what they call the bush would be like our woods. Unlike the Gul Wamkulu or Singanga in the market, most witches and wizards never reveal their identity. In the places where they practiced their magic, mystery abounded like strange weather. In the nearby town of Chizi, men with bald heads, standing as tall as trees, walked the roads at night. Ghost trucks traveled back and forth, approaching fast with their headlights flashing and engines revving loud. Yet, when the lights finally passed, there was no truck attached. In one of the neighboring villages, I heard about a man who'd been shrunk so small by a wizard that his wife kept him in a Coke bottle. In addition to casting spells for curses, the Singanga often battled one another. At night, they piled aboard their planes and prowled the skies, looking for children to kidnap as soldiers. The witch planes could be anything: a wooden bowl, a broom, a simple hat, and each was capable of traveling great distances, Malawi to New York, for example, in a single minute. Children were used as guinea pigs and sent to test the powers of rival wizards. Other nights, they'd visit camps of other witch children for games of mystical soccer, where the balls were human heads stolen from people as they slept. Lying in bed at night, I would become so frightened thinking about these things that I'd cry out for my father. "Papa!" I'd shout, summoning him to my door. "I can't sleep. I'm afraid." My father had no place for magic in his life. To me, this made him seem even stronger. As a devout Presbyterian, he believed that God, not juju, was his best protection. "Respect the wizards," he would tell me, straightening my bed covers. "But remember, William, with God on your side, they have no power against you." I trusted my father, but as I got older, I began to wonder how his explanation accounted for Chuck Norris, Terminator, and Rambo, who arrived at the Wimby Trading Center one summer and caused all kinds of ruckus. These men appeared in action movies that played in the local video, which was really just a mud hut with benches, a television, and a VCR. At night, wonderful and mysterious things happened there. But since I wasn't allowed after dark, I never saw any of them. Instead, I had to hear stories the next morning from friends whose parents weren't so strict. "Last night, I watched the best of all movies," said my friend Peter. "Rambo jumped from the top of the mountain and was still firing his gun when he landed at the bottom. Everyone in front of him died and the entire mountain exploded." He pretended to clutch a machine gun and fire in all directions. "When will they start showing these films during the day?" I said. "I never get to see anything." The night the Terminator came to the video show, it was simply shocking. When Peter found me the next morning, he was still in a state. "William, I just don't understand this movie. The man was shot left, right, and center, and yet he still managed to live. I'm telling you, this Terminator must be the greatest wizard ever." It sounded fantastic. "Do you think the Americans have such magic?" I asked. "I don't believe it." "This is what I saw," Peter said. "I'm telling you, it's true." Although years would pass before I saw any of these films, they began influencing our games at home. One was a shooting game that I played with my cousin Jeffrey, using toy guns we made from a polony bush. Finding a straight branch, we removed its core, like taking out the insides of a ballpoint pen, and used it as a ramrod to fire paper spitballs. Sorry, my kitten is back here going crazy, doing flips on the floor. I was the captain of one team, and Jeffrey was the captain of the other. Along with our cousins, we formed squads and hunted one another between the houses in our village. "You go left and I'll go right," I instructed my soldiers one afternoon, then crawled on hands and knees through the red dirt. My poor mother was constantly scrubbing our clothes. Right away, I spotted Jeffrey's trousers from around the corner of the house. Slowly, without spooking the chickens, I snuck up behind for an ambush. "Tonga!" I shouted, then jammed the ramrod, sending a shower of slime into his face. He clutched his heart and fell to the ground. "Eh, Mayoine," he gasped. "You got me." We were a solid gang of three, me, Jeffrey, and our friend Gilbert. Gilbert's father was the chief of our whole Wimby district, a man whom everyone called Chief Wimby, even though his real name was Albert. When Jeffrey and I got bored with playing our games in the courtyard, we often headed to Gilbert's. "Let's see how many chickens we can count," I said, taking off down the path. Going over to Gilbert's house was always fun, since the chief's work was never finished. As usual, we found a long line of truck drivers, farmers, traders, and market women all waiting to voice their concerns. As we suspected, many of them carried a chicken under their arm, a gift for the chief. "I counted 10, Jeffrey whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Must be lots of problems today." The chief's messenger and bodyguard, Mr. Guada, stood at the door in his short pants and army boots, dressed as a police officer. It was Mr. Guada's job to protect the chief and filter all of his visitors. He was also the chicken collector. "Come, come," he said, and motioned us inside. The chief sat on the sofa in the living room, dressed in a crisp shirt and nice trousers. The chief usually dressed like business people, never in feathers and animal skins. That's in the movies. Another thing about Chief Wimby was that he loved his cat, which was black and white but had no name. In Malawi, only dogs are given names. I don't know why. We found Gilbert in his room singing to the radio. Gilbert had the most beautiful voice and dreamed of becoming a famous singer. My voice sounded like one of the guinea fowl that screeched in our trees as it pooped, but I never let that stop me from singing. "Gilbert, bow! Bow! Sharp! Sharp!" That was our slang we used every time we saw one another. The word beau was short for bonjour, started by some chaps who were learning French in school and wanting to show off. It means hello in that language. I don't know where sharp came from, but it was like saying, "Are you cool?" If we were feeling really good, we went a bit further. "Sure, sure. Fit, fit. Ay." "Let's go to the trading center," I said. "I bet there's a mountain of treasure outside." Offsea. Offsea Boozing Center was the local bar in Wimby. Its most popular drink was Shake Shake, a kind of beer made from corn that was sold in cardboard cartons. I wasn't allowed inside Offsea, but I'm guessing they didn't have a garbage can, because every night the men tossed their empty cartons into the road. Gilbert, Jeffrey, and I liked to collect them. After we washed the cartons out with water, they made the perfect toy trucks. Even though we lived in a small village in Africa, we did many of the same things kids do all over the world. We just used different materials. After talking with friends I met in America, I know this is true. Children everywhere have similar ways of playing with one another. And if you look at it that way, or if you look at it this way, the world isn't such a big place. My friends and I loved trucks. It didn't matter what kind. We loved the 4-ton dump trucks that rumbled out of the big farms, kicking up dust. We loved the small pickups that took passengers from Wimby to Kasungu, the nearest city. We loved them all, and each week we'd compete to see who could build the best one. I know that in America, you can buy toy trucks already assembled in a store. In Malawi, we built ours from Shake Shake cartons and pieces of wire. To us, they were just as beautiful. The axles were sections of wire we bought by picking mangoes, and for the wheels, we used bottle caps. Even better were the plastic caps from our mother's containers of cooking oil, which lasted much longer. And if we took our father's razor blades, we could cut designs in the wheels to give each truck its own unique treading. That way, the tracks in the dirt told us if the truck belonged to Kimkwamba Toyota, for instance, or to Gilbert Company, Ltd. We also built our own monster wagons called Shigiri. That looked like American go-karts. We made the frames from thick tree branches, careful to find ones with giant knots or a fork that could be used as a seat. We then dug up larger tuber roots called kwambu that looked like mutant sweet potatoes and shaped them into wheels. The axles were poles carved from a blue gum tree. After everything was assembled, we tied it all together with vines and hoped it didn't fall apart. To make the car move, one person pulled with a long rope while the driver steered with his feet. With 2 cars side by side, we held debris through the trading center. I cannot read today. We held derbies like races, through the trading center. Let's race, for sure. Last one to reach the barber shop, we'll go blonde. Go! After the race, if we had some money in our pockets, we'd stop by Mr. Banda's shop for a cold bottle of Fanta and some dandy sweets. Mr. Banda ran the Malawian version of a convenience store. On his shelves were packages of margarine and powdered milk, since most people didn't have refrigerators at home to keep milk cold. He also sold aspirin, cough drops, lotions, bars of Life Buoy soap, and on the very bottom shelf, Drew's liver salts. I have no idea what liver salts were used for, but I'm certain they tasted rotten. Whenever we entered, Mr. Banda greeted us in our usual Malawian custom. Muli Bwanji, he said. How are you? Diri bueno, Kaya Inu, we answered. I'm fine. How about you? Diri bueno zikomo. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Again, no clue if I'm saying that correctly. I'm giving it my best go. After that, it was more of the same stuff. You boys keeping out of trouble? Yeah. Helping your mother and father at home? Yeah. Well, give them my greetings. For sure. If we were really hungry, we combined our money and headed to the Kanyanya stand, which was like a Malawian fast food restaurant. It was really just a vat of boiling grease over a fire, but the fried goat meat and potatoes they served were heavenly. The man tending the fire would grunt and say, "How much?" And we would answer, 5 kwacha, or however much money we had. 5 kwacha was less than $1 American. The man then turned around and cut a few chunks of meat from a goat hanging from a rail. He dropped the meat into the boiling oil, followed by a handful of sliced potatoes. When everything floated to the top, he served it on a wooden counter, along with a pile of salt for dipping. "Your mother is a good cook," Gilbert told me once, "but not as good as this." Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and stop there because we're about 15 minutes in. Still not through chapter 1, but we are a little bit farther. So finding a little bit more about William's background and where he came from before we get into the meat part of the story. Bye, guys.